It's finally time. The second part of The Grudge of Edinburgh has finally been released on Netflix. Now I can talk about the whole story rather than just two parts. Hi guys, my name is Dante and welcome to the Anime Underworld. Today I'm going to give a brief rundown about the full story of the Seven Deadly Sins, Grudge of Edinburgh. For those who don't know, after the previous movie, Cursed by Light, was released, there was an announcement for a two-parter movie about the son of Meliodas and Elizabeth, Tristan Leonis, who would become the new main protagonist. The antagonist of this two-parter is Death Pierce, who was set up as a villain around the second to last chapter of the original series. He wanted to make a human-only kingdom. After all, this guy suffered at the hands of both demons and goddesses. But yet not fairies and giants. I don't know where that prejudice came from. Now, like most of my reviews, I'm going to give the pros and cons. I can't just say, oh, this movie sucked because I say it is. I want to find value in something that worked, but also discredit some things that clearly did not work. And here is everything that I said for part 1. Part 1 was honestly kind of okay. It was a little mid because, well, it was just part 1. It wasn't the full story. However, it does do a lot of good building and setting up characters for after the last chapter of the Seven Deadly Sins manga. Meliodas and Elizabeth are clearly happy now being fully married and now having their own son. Tristan is showing himself to be a selfless prince who really wants to help people and not be someone who's just on their couch all day complaining, being spoiled. He wants to be a good protector just like his dad was, and that's great. It's also clear to see that Tristan has some literal internal demons that he's afraid of, and that is to say his demonic half and power. And it's understandable why. If you have such a great power but being afraid of losing control, you would want to try to continue but also live in fear that you might hurt someone when something goes wrong. And that's good development for the Prince of Leonis. Alright, so those were the pros, let's get into the cons. And so far, I had to say that this one is kind of a mix. It includes the runtime and also the fact that not really much happens in this movie because it's just set up for part 2. Part 1 is mostly just setup and you gotta get as much as you can, in which case not really much happens. There's a big fight in the end, but the rest is just character build-up. Which is not bad, but when most people want to see action and it's a two-parter, they're not really going to be looking back on it until part 2 is right around the corner so they can refresh their memories. So having a part 1 setup with a short runtime aren't that bad. I think the biggest con of this movie is the fact that they decided to make it a 3D animated movie. After the whole Studio Dean catastrophe with all the memes, I still see them in my head every time I blink. And the very, very, very bad first trailer, which honestly looked more like a PS2 game or Marvel's current CGI. Yeah, there's a reason why not many people were going to think that this movie was going to be successful. Luckily, over time, the animation has gotten better, but if you pause it at certain moments, it looks weird. After so many bad decisions in terms of animation with the last 2 seasons, there was a good reason why so many people feared that this wasn't going to do well. So those were the pros and cons for part 1 of this whole movie, or at least the whole story. Now that that's out of the way, let's get into the new release. Where part 1 was lacking in action, part 2 easily makes up for it with the entire runtime. Not only is it action-packed, but we see so many great moments, and a lot of funny ones too. We get to see Tristan and Lancelot in action. We also see the Seven Deadly Sins, minus 2 members, returning to show who's boss, and it is such a treat. Not only that, but we also get to see a brief moment of blood-stained Ellie, and man, was this hype. I keep forgetting that Elizabeth was technically a badass in her first life. For any anime-only fans who wonder what Tristan's going to be like in his demon mode, let me just tell you, you're not going to be disappointed. When this kid lets loose, it makes me all sorts of hyped to see this mode again, and also what kind of potential Tristan's going to be. He's only like 13 or 15 years old, and he is such a badass. I can't wait to see what this kid's going to be like as an adult. And again, I mentioned that there were laughs. A lot of my favorite moments were Death Pierce noticing the Sins beating up his entire army. I mean, just his face and realizing how messed up he was, it was so funny. Not to mention Lancelot carrying horse Escanor. I'm sorry, but just saying that line makes me laugh. That's gotta be like the most funniest moments. I mean, all the great stuff mostly happens with this dang horse. Even Meliodas has a funny moment with horse Escanor just by asking him where Tristan went. Oh man, you just gotta see that just for that moment. So part 2 has a lot more pros than part 1, but as for the cons, well, there wasn't really that much. I think the only thing that I didn't like personally was the whole just let it go, like he was trying to beat Elsa. That speech got so annoying after so many repetitions. We get it, you want to see him let loose. The rest of these aren't cons, but they're nitpicks, so I'm not really going to count them as cons. Death Pierce's reason for cursing Elizabeth just to make Meliodas suffer is pretty petty. I mean, the true culprits behind his reason for revenge are dead, and he's only enacting it on them because they're their superiors? Dude. However, I'm still not convinced of where this whole prejudice against fairies and giants came from, considering he had an invisible fairy companion like throughout most majority of the manga. However, I have read comments from fans suggesting that because Cursed by Light happened before the last 2 chapters, it was most likely that Death Pierce was still around there when the brainwashed fairies and giants from the Supreme Deity attacked, so maybe that's where it came from. And then I saw the end of the movie, or at least near the end of the movie, and then I realized, oh, that explains why he's such an extreme bigot. This is another nitpick that I mentioned before earlier in this video, but in the first teaser, or at least in the first part of the movie, we get to see Deanne looking for her kids with King. And yet, get this, we never see them. We got confirmation of at least one kid in the new Origins game. Just stop hiding them, Nakaba. We didn't see them in the last chapter. We didn't get to see them in this movie. Hell, we were supposed to see them in the upcoming manga arc. We were supposed to go to the Fairy King's forest, and I was hyped to see those kids. But no, we got a detour. Just stop hiding them already. Do you have nothing for them? What are you hiding? Sorry, that nitpick kind of turned more into a rant. I'm sorry. It happens to the best of us. Alright, now it's time to give the final scores for both parts and the whole overall score. So because this is a 2-parter plot, I'm going to be adding up each part's total score and then giving it the overall. And what is the score for part 1? Well, I gave it a 7 out of 10. Good material, but nothing much else in terms of just build-up exposition for part 2. Speaking of which, the score for that part is an 8 out of 10. Good action, fun scenes, and filled up many plot holes that the previous portion of the story left out. However, the whole let loose speech was getting way too repetitive for my taste. Now that both parts have been scored, let's do some simple math, do some simple division, and the overall score comes to a 7.5 out of 10. A good movie project with some good material, but not without its flaws. And I really did enjoy this movie, even though the animation was clearly something to get used to. So here are my final thoughts. With Four Knights of the Apocalypse coming out with its anime in the first week of October, I think this movie serves as a good prelude for anime-only fans on what's going to be coming up for the next sequel. I recognize so many moments, so many hints of what's going to happen in the manga that I think anime-only fans are going to soon realize later on. The movie animation had to be something to get used to, especially after Dean, but the story overall really kept my interest, and hopefully it will do the same to you too. And that's been my review. Thanks for listening out to the rest of this video. If you like it, give it a like, subscribe, and share. Until then, I'll see you later, mortals.